she's a different story, but it's an old story. It's the George Wallace story. Or maybe she's not so grand as George Wallace. Maybe it's the Lester Maddox story. It was the lesser George Wallace of Georgia. Um, uh, but it's also part of the whole history of the United States and conservatism with the United States of revival. Now, religious historians look at United States and say one of the things that makes it sort of unusual is this cyclical revival, religious revival. There's the first Great Awakening that before the United States is formed. There's a second Great Awakening. There's arguments, are we now in the midst of a third or fourth Great Awakening? If it's a fourth, when did the third end? But no one disputes that periodically throughout American history there's been these great big revivals. These are obviously populist religious movements, and out of them you see leaders like George Wallace, the famous populist sort of left-right governor of Alabama, or before him, Huey Long. Again, is he left, is he right? It's hard to say. He's populist, but he's certainly, both these guys in some ways tended to sort of consolidate power in a way that is very, very comfortable for elites, that elites have sort of encouraged this. Sarah Palin is the latest incarnation of this. And, I think the question with Sarah Palin is not whether or not we're in this revival moment. I think you look at the Tea Parties and you look at the schisms within the establishment Republican Party and the broader conservative movement. There's no doubt we're in a revival moment. The question is Sarah Palin going to be the one who's going to be that standard bearer? Does she have the juice to become a George Wallace, or to become a Barry Goldwater, or to become something that, as you said, hasn't existed before? And there is potential for that too, I think, because the issues over which this populist movement gets excited are different than they were for Wallace or Long or going back further, Billy Sunday, not in the political sphere, but as a political religious revivalist. They're different issues, they're different times. It's possible that these fringe characters who we've traditionally understood as big fringe, but they end up sort of pushing the establishment one way or the other. I don't see any third parties coming, but there could be a real massive shift in what establishment means. Sarah Palin may not lead that, but she may just ride the crest of that wave, or she's opened the door for someone who is a little bit of a smoother operator. I remember a friend of mine, I think it was in France or Italy, I don't remember. He was sitting in a cafe and someone comes running down the streets yelling, "The professors are coming, the professors are coming," a rampaging mob of professors. Which I think liberalism wants to dismiss as extremism. But I prefer, my favorite forgotten president in American history is James Buchanan, who, in defending really robust and sharp-elbowed debate, says, "I like the noise of democracy. I like the sound of people in the streets making noise." Which is what's made it actually ironic that so many liberals have rushed to denounce these tea parties, these folks on the street, as somehow anti-democratic and mob violence and so on. Now, I don't agree with these demonstrations at all, but they're doing the work of democracy. They feel that their government's not responding to them. They're correct, and I hope it doesn't. But they're saying, look, we are going to make a lot of noise. And there's going to be sharp elbows. We're not going to go out and do this civilly and say, well, I disagree with you. That kind of keeping the conversation quiet, that always favors whoever's holding the power. Whoever's holding the power says, yeah, let's keep things civil and quiet. Whoever's outside says, no, I'm not going to keep things civil and quiet. I'm gonna bang on the door. And I think we may be in this moment, I know we're talking about the future of conservatism, but what's interesting to me also is I think that there's a sense in which we're in, maybe 1964 or 1963, that we could be also moving toward a period of radical revival. as disillusionment with the Democratic Party sets in, and as a generation of folks with just no attachments to the last great radical revival come up and just say, look, I'm pissed about this, and I don't care if Fox News is going to say I'm a 60s retread because I was born in 1985, so clearly I'm not. And I think that moment could be coming. I think I think they are sustainable. And when we talk about the future of conservatism, that's it. I mean, these parties are so consolidated now that the idea of a serious third-party challenge is just kind of ridiculous and so on. That's the future of conservatism. The Democratic and Republican parties combined. Um, uh, uh, the Max Baucus uh, approach to healthcare. That's the future of conservatism. A government in the interest of a big business, essentially. Um, but so the parties are going to stay put, but that doesn't mean politics are going to be defined by the parties. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening beyond that. And on the right now, there's all this stuff happening. What I've been interested in fact, is the real incredible, just sort of kudzu-like growth of fundamentalism in the military. Um, uh, and that's a faction, that's something in play that hasn't been in play for a long time. It's one thing to have fundamentalist activists. It's another thing to have fundamentalist generals uh, who are armed and who have decided that the time has come to redefine their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Um, we're, I don't think we're in danger of any coups. Um, but I've talked to enough senior officers who have lost hold of that traditionally pretty solid subordinate relationship between the military and civilian structure. There's no radical movement like that on the left, but there could be, and I think a lot of the political action, the political life of America is going to start happening outside of the parties.